What's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel. And yes, as the name suggests, today we're going to be looking at my setup for the Faser build, which is a build for the Pyromancer in Outriders. And quick story time, I tried this out right after Faser was basically buffed, and it didn't really blow my hair back or something like that. Of course I could see big damage numbers coming from it, but I still preferred the old classic Akari overheat ash blast kind of combination. But during a recent stream carry event that I did, I saw some really impressive damage numbers coming from some players that I was carrying through content, or let's say they were carrying me when it comes to the damage numbers. And I thought, you know what, I better get my ass in gear and at least put together a decent build of this, give it a good try out before I make up my mind, and maybe I'll change my mind. Now, long story short, and I'm sure to cover it later on in the video as well, but I still prefer the cookie cutter Akari overheat ash blast combo. And basically I would say the two reasons why I prefer that to the Faser build is because reason number one, I predominantly play solo, and I do like the way that you can basically hit an entire screen or entire map's worth of units with that overheat ash blast combo. Or shall I rather say ash blast overheat? I'm saying it the wrong way around. So that's the one thing. I do think that the Faser build, in my opinion, is more suited for multiplayer, where you can really shine as a true DPS and basically punching holes through bosses with Faser, while not necessarily having to chase down the little minions that go and hide everywhere, and snipers that sit around, where your teammates could potentially take care of them. And where you could concentrate more, like I said, on positioning and getting those really powerful Faser shots in. And that would be reason number one. And then reason number two is one thing that's just like a pet peeve of mine, is that the Faser spin up of the skill to shoot the shot just takes a little bit too long for me. And it's to the point now where I actually spend a mod slot or a talent point in the class tree or the skill tree to just be able to actually just make it fire off quicker or something like that. So the spin up is just a little bit too long. But as I said, both of those two reasons are just me reasons, and this is an extremely good build, and you can punch out some really serious numbers. And I mean, you can literally cripple bosses with the right combination of skills and debuffs, hitting them at the right time and then hitting them with a Faser. Also, on the other hand, it also features extremely low cooldown, so you can shoot as many Phasers as you want or as you can muster, and it's literally something that you basically use every time it's off cooldown. And yeah, it's really powerful. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in to the build. Okay, so jumping right in, firstly, let's talk weapons. The most important thing is to get as much status power as possible on your character, and therefore it's in your best interest to actually pick a primary that has status power on it. Now, my usual go-to combo for pretty much every character, as I'm sure you'll know by now if you watch my builds, is of course Death Shield and with Fortress on, and then something like Shadow Comet, and then I usually use Anemoy with Moaning Winds and Fortress, and then I also have a sidearm with that combo. But actually for this particular build, for two reasons, it's better for you to take a weapon with status power. Which neither one of these two have on, by the way. As you can see, they have armor pierce, healing received, and close range damage, and the same thing, weapon leech on the Death Shield side. So the status power is actually going to empower your Faser, as we'll see when we actually look at the skill and talk a little bit more about it. So that kind of opens up your choices here in terms of which weapon you use, and you have some options. I've tried it out with Darkness Charmer, which has status power on it as well, which has you can do some phenomenal mod combinations on there. I've tried it with Roaring Umbra, which also has status power on there, and I've even tried it with Thunderbird, which also has status power on. But for me, partly because it's kind of like my unicorn, but also because it's a gun that I really enjoy, Air to the Desert works really well, because you can also get really nice long range shots in with it, because it is a tactical assault rifle. But as you can see here, you have 30% status power on this, and then what I do is I keep the Sandstorm on there and I throw Fortress on there. Fortress is really just, you cannot not put it on there because of the additional 43% damage that you get from that. Sure, you can use other builds, and I'm sure that you're still going to be able to punch out some really decent numbers, but the point is Fortress is really what allows you to basically drop bosses in like 2 shots essentially. So That's then my primary weapon. Now this build is so good and the cooldowns are so low that I don't use the Moaning Wind swap combination or anything like that at any point. So I literally just have the air to the desert out every time. Every 5 seconds I'm dropping a sandstorm on stuff, which is dealing additional damage to things, which is further on empowered by the fortress. And of course I'm just, you know, shooting my skills as they are on cooldown, or rather come off cooldown. Now when we go over to the armor itself, even though this is a phaser build, I believe the more powerful, or the most powerful setup, and at least that's also, I'm sure if you look at other players' builds for this as well, because there's kind of like a meta forming behind this, right, is that Akari still happens to be the better set for this, due to the fact that you can get the additional 50% anomaly bonus from the set when you hit stuff with heat waves. And so you can further on augment this build to use a combination of heat wave, phaser, and a third skill to just try and boost your phaser hits as much as possible to deal as much damage. So in this particular case here, I'm using the 3-piece set from the Akari, and I'm using the head, the chest, and the pants, because those are the 3 pieces that give you anomaly power. These 3 over here. If you were to use the gloves and the boots in your 3-piece, then you would be getting max health instead of anomaly, and of course that's not what you want, because you want to be getting as much anomaly as possible. In particular here, I'm using Fire Tsunami and Captain Hunter on. This is very much like an assassination build, so you're gonna in any case just be murdering fucking normal creeps and normal mobs, just to the fact that you're doing a lot of anomaly damage by default, but you have so much status power that your burns that are left over after your heat waves mostly kill stuff before you even have to shoot them. Just by hitting them with a heat wave, the burn from it will actually usually kill most of the lower level mods, or mobs rather. So as I said, this is an assassination build, so you want to try and prime up as much damage so that you can take down captains and bosses very well. And that's again where this build, as I said, shines, because in multiplayer you are going to be the heaviest hitter. In co-op, you are going to be the one that takes down bosses and deals the majority of the damage to bosses, while potentially, let's say, a Devastator and a, let's say, Trickster, they're hunting down like sort of like the scrap around the map and the enemies that get away, and they're basically debuffing them as well. That would be an insanely good setup, for instance, for a trio squad, for instance. Secondly, on the chest piece itself, I'm using Branded and I'm using Tidal Wave. Now Branded gives me the ability, or rather augments Thermal Bomb, so that when Thermal Bomb is on something or explodes and affects things around it, all of those things receive 40% additional damage. This is huge if you have a boss that is you're just starting out the fight, you hit him with 2 heat waves, you drop the thermal bomb on them, and then you hit him with a phaser. That is going to hit for the maximum amount of damage that you can get from that, and it's just going to hit like a fucking Mack truck. Tidal Wave gives you a second heat wave, which is really good. Now, could you build this in a way that you have 3 heat waves? Yeah, sure, you definitely could, and heat waves are super strong at high anomaly power, and with Burnt Out, which is also on this set, which I'll show just now. But 2 is sufficient in being able to get the maximum from the Burnt Out mod, but also allowing for some other mods that further augment this build. When we go to the pants, I've kept Anomaly Echo on there, which by default comes on the waistcloth of the Akari, but then I've put Ashen Champion on there, and Ashen Champion is specifically for the phaser beam, and it puts ash on enemies instead of burn that get hit by the phaser beam. Every enemy that gets hit by this is essentially then boosting up your anomaly power by 20% for 10 seconds, and this stacks up to 5 times. So if you hit 5 enemies with 1 phaser beam, you're getting 100% additional anomaly power, which means your follow-up heat waves are also just crushing it. So fantastic combo right there. Now, what's very important to notice that is in these 3 pieces, only one of them, because remember that set pieces or legendary pieces, they come with specific roles on their 3 substats. So unfortunately, on these 3 pieces, only one of them really gives you status power, and 2 of them give you cooldown reduction. So it really then depends on the 2 purple pieces that you add on, that you get as much status power from that as you can, and you get as much cooldown reduction from that as you can. And this right here is an example of that, where I have Anomaly, status power, and cooldown reduction, which is the perfect role for this build. And here I have Burnt Out, which basically just augments your heat waves so that everything that you damage with a heat wave also takes additional 25% damage. So as you can see, everything about this build is trying to dump as much debuffs and everything on an enemy, and then using Faser to poke them essentially when you have the maximum amount of debuffs on them before they expire, and basically hitting with some really hard phasers. The second mod on here is Size Matters, which increases the beam's radius by 100%. Now, you can test both versions of this. By default, Faser is kind of like a little bit like a laser, pardon the name, I guess. But the point is that you are going to sometimes miss, like for instance, if you have a cluster of units standing together and you kind of like hit in the middle, you might miss some of the outliers, and some of them won't actually be hit. Or you might have a situation where you have 3 units that are spaced out, so you'll put a Faser in between the 2, and then you'll kind of like miss the 3rd guy to the side here. Now, by putting Size Matters on there, it actually increases the radius by substantially. 100% is a lot in this case. And in the previous example that I used with the 3, you'll often find then that you can just poke right in the middle and it'll actually kill all 3, basically everything around it. The other thing worth mentioning as well is that Faser makes a small little, I guess you could say, bubble around you as well, and also murders things around you. So in situations where you are trying to actually hit a boss in the back, even if things come running at you from the side and try to melee you and jump on you, the Faser will actually still hit them as well, which is a fantastic thing. The 5th one I have here, and this is really the only place where I would change something on this build, is you'll notice that here I have anomaly power, close range damage, and status power. So I'm missing the cooldown reduction here. I've yet to find a purple piece that has the right configuration for what I want here, but for now, status power is really good, and that's also a good thing that I have that on here. Now, yeah, I have frequent Faser on here, which basically reduces your Faser cooldown by another 30%. You have options here. I opted for this because the shining point of this build is of course Faser, and as many times as you can get that out and get those shots out, that's where the majority of your damage is going to come from. Although make no mistake, Heat Wave is going to also produce quite a bit of additional damage as well. So just more Phasers means more damage, means shit dies quicker, so it just makes more sense. My only defensive ability, or rather my only defensive mod on here, is Damage Absorber. You have options here. The Faser also has a skill or a mod that you can put on that essentially increases your resistance and your armor by 65% while you're charging up a Faser to shoot it. I think it's overkill to have both of those on your build, so choose between one of them. Damage Absorber seems to be the better choice for me, because even though the values are less, the point is that you have this up permanently, whereas the Faser mod is only up when you're casting Faser. And in testing, I found this to be more reliable, I guess is the right word. So then if we move over to skills, of course, as I've mentioned now, the point is that we are using Heat Wave, we're using Thermal Bomb, and we're using Faser Beam. And just to point out the cooldowns that we have down here, Heat Wave is on a 6.2 second cooldown, which is ridiculously good. Thermal Bomb is slightly slower at 9.7. But generally speaking, you're using Thermal Bomb for the branded mod only. It doesn't do bad damage per se, but you're not going to be depending on this to essentially, be taking down minions. That's what Heat Wave and Faser Beam is for. Thermal is mostly for the debuff that you get from branded and being able to take down, captains, elites, bosses, things like that. Faser is on a 6-second cooldown, which is super sexy. If I, was able to get that final cooldown reduction on my boots, I could most likely drop it to 5.4, 5.5 around there, which would of course be better, but in the grand scheme of things, not really making that much of a difference. So as we can see here, the main reason why we're trying to stack status power as much as possible is you can see that Faser Beam directly benefits from as much status power as you can basically put on your gear. So if I used a weapon that didn't have status power as a substat, then I would be missing an additional 30% here. So that's it. Then lastly, when we move over to the class and the points there, the route that I've tracked through here, the emphasis of this particular route and how I've plotted it here is to get as much cooldown reduction as possible, to get as many magma golem class nodes as possible, because that gives you additional anomaly power. And then lastly, also to be sure to pick up magma elemental, which gives you much needed resistance piercing, so that when you heat wave something, it activates the resistance piercing, which then gets the benefit, which then, you know, benefits a phaser shot, you know, fully. So just going through it here, you'll see, again, as I said, whenever I'm given a choice here, I'm favoring picking up anomaly power and additionals to anomaly power. I'm trying to get the cooldowns dropped as much as possible, so wildfire is essential here, as is, you know, warm up. And again here, magma golem, these nodes here, as you can see, so that's the only one I've missed. I've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4 magma golem, so that's an additional 10% due to distant flame, so additional 10% of anomaly power. And again, then just picking up the nodes as we go through here, you get some skill life leech ones. Anomalous lava gives you a lot of survivability as soon as you activate your heat waves or your phaser. You get another 45% additional armor, which is definitely going to protect you against stuff trying to hit you. Then lastly, also you have fuel for the embers here, which is really great for when you suddenly get hit by something and you drop to 30% or less of your max health. Then essentially your skill life leech is doubled, and that just helps you get back up again very quickly. So that's it. That's the phaser build. Enjoy it. Let me know how you've set yours up. Try it out. Let me know how you're finding the damage to be. Just recently, Outriders got the legendary loot patch, if I can call it that. So legendary drop rates have been increased by essentially 100%, as well as level caps having been removed for legendary gear dropping in the game. So it's really like if you were thinking of coming back to the game and getting another taste, you know, trying it out again, you were giving it a couple of weeks break, now is a phenomenal time to come back, because you actually stand a good chance of finding those legendaries that have been eluding you the entire time. So again, also let me know in the comments below if you've been finding the items you've been missing, if you've been enjoying coming back. And that's basically it. Most likely in the coming week or two, I'll be doing a couple of more viewer carry events, so definitely keep an eye out for that within the Discord, which is the link down below in the description of this video, or just in any post announcements on the channel itself. And that's basically it. So thanks for watching, especially if you made it this far. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if this is the kind of content that you enjoy. But most importantly, have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.